I found myself in a state of self-pity, having spent the third consecutive night in a state of self-reflection. The challenges associated with being a young woman in her late teens were evident. I found myself in a state of self-pity for the third consecutive night, contemplating the challenges faced by an 18-year-old boy still enrolled in high school. While I acknowledged the general context, this particular thought did not bring me much solace. I turned over to face the opposite side and attempted to distract myself with other thoughts, anything to take my mind off the matter. Andrea had been my partner for nearly 2 years, and our relationship appeared to be going well, particularly in comparison to the numerous breakups I observed around me. Her family decided to leave, citing her father's job-related concerns. At that moment, I was distracted from the conversation, as she was similarly distraught. However, there was little we could do, as none of us were independent enough to leave our families and live on our own. Then, a quiet voice from behind the door caught my attention. Even when I turned away, I immediately recognized the voice as that of the older sister. She must have come to tell me something. The family decided to omit certain details regarding her father's occupation. I was not particularly attentive during that part of the conversation. She was just as upset as I was about the situation, but there was not much that could be done. None of us were independent enough to leave our families and live on our own. "Hello, Alex." A quiet voice came from behind the door. Even when I turned away from her, I immediately recognized the voice of the older sister. She must have finally made it home on the day Andrea really left. It hit me hard, and naturally, the only person I could talk to about it was not there. "Hi, Megan. I'm Mbak. Do you want to talk?" she asked. Mom, no doubt, told her what happened as soon as she walked through the door. At least it would have saved me the trouble, although I was not sure what I wanted to say. I got to the point where I almost enjoyed feeling sorry for myself in some weird way. "You miss her, eh?" "I miss her dearly." "You do?" she said, without prompting. I nodded, and Megan sat on the bed behind me, reaching out to tousle my hair. "It's not that serious," I said. "It's just a school crush. We wouldn't have lasted, and even long-lasting marriages don't guarantee a lasting relationship. But you'll never know." "I understand," Megan said, her voice sympathetic. "I love you, and I try to empathize with you, but we're from different backgrounds. I had a hard time being understood by my nation." Megan, on the other hand, was different. She didn't always have advice for me, but she listened, and more importantly, she never judged. That was the main thing that set her apart from my parents and even my friends. I could tell her the most embarrassing and terrible things I'd done or thought, and she wouldn't even flinch. "Yeah, that's part of it." I guess I said. I returned to my previous position on my back and looked at my sister. She sat. I returned to my previous position on my back and looked at my sister, who sat and looked at me with a completely neutral expression on her face. "Although it's not that important," I continued, "people are starving and dying everywhere, and I'm whining about a girl. Put up with it, Alex." She said, "Just because your problem isn't the worst in the world doesn't mean you can't take care of it." I felt tears welling up and quickly blinked them away. Megan wouldn't have cared, but I hated crying, even when I was alone. I experienced feelings of self-pity, or perhaps I was simply crying because I felt remorse. It is challenging to ascertain whether I had a dream in which she was present. For the past 2 nights, I have been waking up and perceiving her in the room with me. She appears to be a realistic figure, yet she remains silent and does not respond to my verbal interactions. I then attempt to touch her, only to realize that she is not there. I find myself snorting in disbelief. I believe this phenomenon may be more akin to a hallucination than a dream. Given that I am not, Megan nodded in agreement, and I observed that she was chewing a few strands of hair out of the corner of her mouth. This was usually indicative of her being focused on a task and not paying attention to her surroundings. "Sometimes it happens to me," she said. "It's related to stress or worry." "I've had similar experiences with hallucinations," I said. "One day, I woke up and was convinced there was a huge hole in the floor. I needed to go to the bathroom, but I was afraid." Megan nodded in response, her expression indicating she was focused on something and not paying attention to her surroundings. "Sometimes when I'm stressed or worried, I have similar hallucinations," she explained. One day, I woke up and was convinced there was a huge hole in the floor. I needed to go to the bathroom, but I was afraid I would fall if I got out of bed. In the end, I actually jumped off the edge of the bed where I thought it was safe. It's funny that you remember, I commented, reflecting on the strange memory. Yeah, I agreed, smiling at the memory. Do you think you'll be okay? She asked. I think so. I'll probably be fine later, I replied. Okay, I'll be there if you need me, she said, standing up to leave. Thank you, Megan, I said as she stepped out of the room. Out of the doorway anytime, little brother, she replied, as on the previous 2 nights. You're back, I whispered, just checking on you. You were making sounds like I do not know, she whispered back. Maybe it was a bad dream. She ruffled my hair as Megan always did, and for a moment, I enjoyed the feeling before I realized what the difference was. You're talking, I chatted her. So what did you ask? She raised an eyebrow. You never said. Out of the doorway anytime, little brother, she replied, her tone professional. As on the previous 2 nights, I woke up disoriented in my darkened room. You're back, I whispered, my voice formal. I was just checking on you, she whispered back. You were making sounds like I do not know, maybe a bad dream. She ruffled my hair as Megan always did, and for a moment, I enjoyed the feeling before I realized what the difference was. You're talking, I chatted her. So what did you ask last time, Andrea? She asked, her tone calm. Why can you do it this time? Maybe your imagination is just getting better, she said softly. Maybe I agreed. Can you stay with me for a while? I asked. Of course, Alex, just for a little while. I'm glad you're here, I told her. I miss you so much already. What's the matter? I asked. Nothing, just nothing, she said. You immediately recoiled as if you had been burned. She may have seemed reluctant before, but it was a categorical order to. The previous night, Andrea inquired about Alex's ability to perform the act once more, suggesting that his imagination might be improving. Alex concurred, but added that he would only stay with Andrea for a brief period. Andrea expressed her gratitude for Alex's presence, stating that she missed him. Alex, however, felt that she was hesitant, and inquired about the reason. Andrea initially did not respond, but then she screamed in a sharp manner. Alex immediately recoiled, as if she had been burned. Although Andrea appeared reluctant at first, she eventually complied with the order to stop. Alex apologized, and Andrea's demeanor softened when she saw how upset he was. She pressed his head against her shoulder and said, It's okay, I'm not mad. Just go to sleep. The following morning, Alex told Megan about the strange events of the previous night. Megan asked why, and Alex explained that it was just dreams or hallucinations. While they were having breakfast, Alex took the opportunity to talk to his sister before his parents arrived. I had to go to school, and I was concerned that the memory of last night's events would persist throughout the day. I hoped that Megan would offer insights that would alleviate my concerns. Andrea has reappeared. I continued, and I experienced a different hallucination, one that felt more realistic. It was as if she was almost present, yet she did not want me to touch her. I am uncertain what this signifies. Megan suggested that it could be a result of my brain's inability to process excessive information. I expressed my skepticism, shaking my head. I sensed I had to go to school. I was afraid that the memory of last night would bother me all day, and I hoped Megan would say something that would help. Andrea has reappeared. I continued. It was a different hallucination, more realistic. It was as if she was actually almost there, but she didn't want me to touch her. I don't know what that means. Maybe Megan suggested that your brain couldn't handle so much. I don't think so, I said, shaking my head. I felt my cheeks warm up a little, even though Megan didn't even blink. It was not mentioning what we had done last night that confused me. We have already talked about this many times, but when I said it out loud, I realized how stupid it sounded. I was trying to use a product of my own imagination. However, I think that if I had been thinking clearly at the time, it wouldn't have been a big hallucination. Maybe it's just my subconscious trying to tell me something. I exhaled, as if I lacked merit in her eyes. I smiled. Probably not. Don't say that, Alex. Never. I was taken aback by the firmness of my sister's words. The notion that I was unworthy of Andrea's affection was more distressing to her than to me. Well, whatever. There must be a reason for this. I insisted. Perhaps Megan mentioned, thoughtfully. Just try not to become overly preoccupied with it. Okay? I'll try. I agreed, although I doubted my ability to complete the task. It was challenging for me to. I spent a restless night, unable to sleep. I was preoccupied with the idea that I might not be deserving of Andrea's presence, and I was concerned about her potential return during the night. I was troubled by her reaction when I attempted to touch her. I felt a sense of unease, and I looked around, confused. I didn't recall sleeping, but the clock on my dresser indicated nearly 3 a.m. I spent a restless night, unable to sleep, as thoughts of Andrea lingered in my mind. I was preoccupied with the possibility that I might not be deserving of her, particularly given my recent actions. However, my primary concern was the possibility of her returning during the night. I was haunted by the memory of her reaction the previous time I attempted to touch her. I felt a sense of unease, and I looked around, confused. I didn't recall sleeping, but the clock on my dresser indicated that it was almost 3 a.m. Andrea was once again by my bedside. She asked if I had had a bad dream, to which I dismissed with a shrug. However, I requested that she share her thoughts on my behavior from the previous night. I inquired if I had done something wrong, and she assured me that there was no issue. She apologized for her behavior the previous night, and I expressed my love for her in return. She smiled faintly at me and asked, "Alex, do you love me?" I confirmed my love for her. She asked the same of me, and I flinched slightly. Upon mentioning her name, I experienced a sense of peculiarity. I anticipated a reaction of surprise or discomfort when I expressed my affection for her. This might be our final encounter. She informed me that she wished for me to comprehend the depth of her sentiments, as we were prepared to engage in any activity that evening. "Alex, I assure you that I am not going to impede your wishes. Are you certain that we should not proceed if you do not wish to?" I replied. "I am certain that you will find everything you desire is available for the duration of this evening." The intensity of our encounter was comparable to the previous night, and on this occasion, she did not exhibit any signs of reluctance or tension. Subsequent to that, we engaged in intimate activities. It has been several weeks since that night, and I feel as though the most challenging aspects have passed. At times, I experienced a sense of missing Andrea, though these moments were less frequent and less intense. I understood that the last time I saw her was a figment of my imagination. It was evident even if it appeared so genuine at the time. However, I believe this contributed to my well-being. I found myself devoting more time to Megan, partly because she became the only female in my life again. She did not seem to be bothered by my presence. Megan's demeanor indicated an abundance of patience, as she sat in her room and conversed about a non-existent topic. I was positioned on the bed, while Megan was at her computer. I observed a box on her dresser. I had previously noticed it and disregarded it. However, upon closer inspection of the inscription on the side, I recognized its purpose. Megan, who was idly engaged in a solitary activity, turned away when I paused in mid-sentence. After I looked away, she noticed what I was looking at and appeared disappointed. I apologized and felt myself blush. "It's none of my business. I apologize for leaving it lying around. I just didn't think clearly." "Let's not dwell on it," Megan said as she stood up and threw the box in the trash. I looked at Megan and saw that she was looking at an open pregnancy test box on her dresser. I apologized, blushing as I spoke. "It's none of my business. I apologize for leaving it lying around. I just didn't think. I didn't think. Let me stop there." Megan stood up and threw the box in the trash before sitting down again. I wondered if I should leave. The situation was pretty awkward, and I didn't know what to do except hope that it would pass after a set time. "I'm not pregnant," she finally blurted out. "Oh, okay. I was just nervous," Megan continued. "There was a test a month ago," and she shrugged helplessly, clearly trying to gauge my reaction. I considered the possibility of informing her parents, but I decided against it. I reassured her that I wouldn't do that. I expressed my relief that she was not pregnant. I admitted that I was not prepared to be an uncle or a mother. She appeared slightly more at ease. I hoped that I would not be so naive in the future. It was slightly disconcerting that Megan felt I could discuss her, but I consoled myself. I reassured myself that her nervousness was likely due to the stress of the situation. She had performed admirably, that I did not notice anything out of the ordinary, that it was only later, while lying in bed, that a disturbing thought occurred to me, and I immediately pushed her away. But she persisted, merely nodding that it had been nearly a month since Andrea. This was around the time that Megan indicated Andrea was most likely to conceive. I told myself that the situation would eventually resolve itself. However, I became agitated, and I dismissed the notion that I had entertained the thought of confusing my sister with my ex-girlfriend. I realized that I had been imagining the imaginary Andrea. Megan had mentioned that she could get pregnant around the same time. I told myself that it was just a coincidence. I got tired of thinking about it. I felt as though my mind was suggesting something I should never have thought about, that I had confused my sister with my ex-girlfriend. I realized that it was easy. All I had to do was go ask Megan who this guy was and put an end to the matter. I didn't like interfering in her life, but I was willing to do it anyway given the circumstances. Megan, I called softly, approaching her room. "What is it?" she asked, catching me before she fell asleep. "I must have caught her," I replied. "I need to know something, and it might seem a little strange. It's about that guy you were talking about, the one that, about a month ago, I was unable to reach Megan, so I inquired again. I sounded desperate and I couldn't control it. Megan continued to look at me, and I realized that I wasn't imagining it. "Alex, I don't remember," she finally said. "Yes, she finally replied. I replied stupidly, feeling sick at the thought of what I had done. All the while, my sister was by my side. All she did for me was me. "I'm sorry, Megan. Oh my God. I'm so sorry." I wandered away from her into the hallway, trying to get back to my room. I used my sister. In hindsight, it is evident that there were numerous indications that should have alerted me to the situation, yet I refused to acknowledge them. I collapsed on the floor next to the bed, unable to do anything but curl up into a ball. I had done something terrible to my sister, and I was unable to apologize enough. "Alex," Megan called softly. She followed me into my room. I couldn't understand why she would do this, knowing how sick I was, except that my sister would never hate me, even after what I had done. This thought upset me even more. I attempted to position myself in a more reclined posture, seeking to withdraw into my own thoughts. I recognized that I was not deserving of another encounter with her. I had to depart. That was the only action I could take for her at this time. "Alex, please look at me." The sound of her voice, breaking halfway to pleading, made me turn away from Pure. I attempted to curl up more, to lose myself in myself. I didn't deserve to ever see her again. I had to leave. That was all I could do for her. "Alex, please look at me." The sound of her voice breaking halfway to pleading made me turn away from Pure. Reflex. My sister was upset, and I instinctively wanted to help, but of course I couldn't. "Not this time. I'm so sorry, Megan," I whispered. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault, bro. It was me. You didn't even know what you were doing." I had to, although I should have understood. I noticed the discomfort in her cheeks, and I attempted to wipe them away. However, I quickly realized my actions and stopped. I apologized, explaining that I did not intend to offend her. I told her that I understood her discomfort and that I would respect her boundaries. I noticed the tears on her cheeks first, and I attempted to wipe them away with my hand. However, I quickly realized my actions and recoiled, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to offend you," I muttered. "You didn't. I'll let you do what you want. Remember, I knew what was going on, and it was I noticed the redness on my cheeks and attempted to wipe them away. But then I realized what I was doing and recoiled. "I didn't mean to offend you." "You didn't, did you?" I'll let you do what you want. Remember, I knew what was going on, and it was my decision. Megan shifted slightly, leaned against the bed, and made herself comfortable. You were hurting little brother, and I knew I could fix the situation. This may be my secret, and you will never have to know about it. She smiled at me a little sadly. It would have worked too if I really wanted it to be a secret. I don't understand, I said in genuine confusion. She looked away for a moment, long enough for me to be ready to verbally push her again. Alex, you were selfish, she said softly. I became careless, and I know it's because I would like to express that I had hoped for a positive outcome. I had hoped that one day you would feel the same way about me that I feel about you. She stood up as I stared at her, unable to fully process what she had told me. She said it was a stupid thing to do, stupid and selfish, but now it's done, and I just hope you don't hate me for it. She gave me another of those sad smiles and walked out the door. She stopped in the hallway and looked like she was going to say something else, but she stopped and left. Naturally, the next few days there was a certain level of discomfort between Megan and me. She made every effort to make my life easier, refrained from attempting to initiate conversation, and generally respected my personal space. I could discern that she was experiencing discomfort. It was evident whenever we crossed paths in the hallway or when we were required to act as though nothing had changed when seated at the dining table. It is evident to me that our parents appeared to overlook other issues, although this could be a matter of perception. I missed her as well, despite the peculiarity of the situation. Despite residing in the same residence and encountering each other on a daily basis, there were occasions when I experienced a sense of longing for her presence. At times, I felt the desire to engage in conversation with her, and would begin to walk towards her room, only to pause and remember that the circumstances had changed. For the first time in a considerable period, there were issues between us that required resolution before we could resume our usual interactions. I was uncertain whether it would be feasible to revert to the previous state of our relationship. Megan nearly conveyed that I held a brotherly figure in her regard, yet I was uncertain about my own sentiments. Regarding her, naturally, I had strong feelings for her, but she was still my sister, and there were boundaries that we should not have crossed. However, it should be noted that we had already crossed the most significant line there was. If only she wasn't my sister, or if society had evolved in a different direction, then we could act with complete freedom. It was a genuine question that I had to address. All other factors being equal, what would I like my relationship with Megan to be like? When I considered it from that perspective, it appeared more manageable. I wanted her to be content, and if that, we would have been closer than before, closer than we should have been. At the time, I was fine with the idea of making love to my sister. However, I angrily dismissed the thought and tried my best to not think about it again. Over time, I realized that this was not just a sick fantasy. I had come to terms with it. If I had had more time to think about it before I met Megan, I probably would not have been upset. The problem was that I still had to deal with the real world, which meant that my relationship with my sister's behavior is not suited to this situation, as it could potentially cause harm to others. Alex, are you here? Megan's voice sounded from behind me, bringing me back to reality. Yeah, the pizza just arrived. I'll leave it in the kitchen when you're ready. Okay, thanks. Our parents were out for the evening, so Megan ordered pizza for us. I sighed when I realized that she was thinking about me again and wasn't forcing me to be in the same room with her long enough to have a snack. She was so good to me. She always was, and I was a terrible person. Brother, I understand that people's well-being is a concern, but Megan and I were already experiencing discomfort. After making my decision, I proceeded downstairs and prepared a plate of pizza. I then entered the living room. Megan looked at me in surprise as I sat down on the far end of the couch. Hi, I said simply. She smiled slightly but sincerely at me for the first time in what felt like a long time. We didn't say anything else for a while, but I believe my presence was enough for Megan. I occasionally glanced at her. She appeared to be in a better mood than in recent days. I proceeded to take my plate back to the kitchen. When I returned to the living room, I took the opportunity to sit next to Megan. I apologize for my behavior over the past few days, Megan. I understand that things are not fine, but you're always there when I need you. I I reacted poorly and I apologize. It doesn't have to be any different, I said. I mean, there's nothing I can do about what has already happened, she said. We encountered an unexpected situation, but it will not recur if you prefer. I appreciate your perspective, and I assure you that I do not harbor any ill will towards you. To be honest, Megan, I am uncertain how to interpret this situation. My primary concern is your well-being and contentment, as you are entitled to it. She regarded me with a cryptic expression. I'm not sure what to think about this situation, Megan. All I know is that I want you to be happy. You deserve it. She looked at me enigmatically for a moment and then slowly brought her face closer to mine. It didn't take long, Megan, she said when we broke off again. I can't help it. You're too good. You shouldn't do it here. I said, our parents weren't supposed to come back for a while, but there was no point in taking. Megan and I had a brief moment of connection before she broke the connection. I saw her frown, and she shrugged, standing up. Okay, let me go, she said, helping me off the couch and practically dragging me up the stairs to her room. Are you ready, Alex? Are you ready to meet your big sister? I didn't respond. I just nodded in the affirmative. Now what? I asked after a moment. Well, we still have about an hour and a half before Mom and Dad get back, Megan said thoughtfully. So until then, I think we can do whatever we want. I liked the sound of it and,